Everyone was surprised around, saying that the ability to fly on the golden sword can only be obtained after reaching the golden pill. The headmaster of Kaiyuan High School in Defa had landed, and everyone was talking about how they wanted to reach the golden pill as soon as possible. The girl then came to her senses, and at that time she was supported by the teacher. After she saw who had arrived, she tried with all her might to pronounce the director's name. The next moment, the girl was already unconscious with torn clothes and drops of blood flowing from her lips in a thin stream. Lowering his head piteously and raising his hand to her chin, the director said that she needed help to begin with. A wind rose up near him, shaking his robes and long gray hair, and he made a loud announcement that they had suspended the 100th Martial Arts University entrance exam ceremony. The children were worried and aggressive that something serious had to happen because the ceremony was suspended, and this had not been done since the founding of Kaiyuan School. They hoped that it would not affect their entrance exams in any way. He walked up the stairs and spoke, urging the students to behave more discreetly. The director menacingly continued to say that he had learned the news that the Jormungand Order, which operates in the city, was involved in this situation. The students around the director were very surprised that it was the Order of Jormungand, and he emphasized to them that for the sake of safety, they are restricting access to free exit from the school, asked not to be heroic, and that every curator had to give the students safety, and it was also necessary to follow all the instructions in an organized manner. The children started to run, and they said in fear that this is the same order that can even go to their heads to achieve their goals. They can get rid of the cultivators without hesitation, and it was scary. Also, some asked why they stayed in the city of Wuji, and whether everything would be fine with them. During this stampede, someone in the crowd grabbed one of the students by the arm. This student turned out to be number 1, who confusedly turned to look at this person. It was the old man, and he asked where she was going, and the girl grabbed his hand and pulled him, saying, "What are you doing? It's related to your entrance exam." They stood opposite each other, and she told him that this is a certain opportunity that comes only once in a lifetime, and he, on the other hand, was interested in what kind of opportunity it was. The girl showed the edge of the piece of paper and said that a reward had been announced for this mission in the city of Wuji, and the whole point was that Jormungand planned to invade their school. The old woman emotionally began to tell, fully unfolding the piece of paper, that if he catches them, the University of Martial Arts will definitely see his strength and will certainly accept him. The puzzled boy asked how she found out about it. He grabbed the piece of paper in his hands, and she waved her hands and said that her parents had been told by law enforcement officers to be more observant. The girl circled around him, saying that no matter what he was worried about, she would find people who would be able to help him. She quietly told him in his ear that they would share the reward equally, so everyone would be in the plus, because besides, he would definitely be able to enter the martial arts university. The boy and girl blushed from such a short distance between them. He quite aggressively moved away from her, saying that he would not go and wanted to return to the dormitory, and in his mind he asked himself that he was still at the stage of purification. If he went to fight with such murderers, he would surely die, looking like a suicide. The elder was annoyed and offended by such an act. She said that it was merciful on her part, but he does not appreciate care at all. In the schoolyard, the teacher ran to meet the student and asked worriedly what happened. The fair-haired boy, catching his breath, said that Zhou Tao and Su Li had an argument. A couple of ribs were broken, they were vomiting blood, and in general, they were left without strength. The curator reacted to this situation very aggressively by asking if they had been helped and asked to take the boy away, but he agreed in fear. The curator wondered if it was really Su Li, because he was still at the level of purifying his qi, and clearly not at the level of Zhou Tao. In one moment, a blue energy began to appear near him with the help of movements, which filled him completely. Then he ordered up and, taking the student's hand, pulled him along. It was a sunny day in the male dormitory building of the 3rd year of Kaiyuan High School. One of the guys who had a tattoo of the Order of Jormungand said that this is the current mission. Within 24 hours, Kaiyuan School's entrance exam proctor Huang Haopa was to be killed. The fair-haired giant thought with a smile that this is a good place to hide. The teachers definitely don't think to look for them there in general, only they are responsible for this mission, judging by the entire cultivation base. Even if they come across 5 or 6 teachers, they will still deal with them with ease, respectively. The supervisor their teeth too. His yellow eyes narrowed and frowned very maliciously, and the scar that ran through the entire eye was also visible. He pressed his friend very tightly, telling him that if the situation from the past repeats itself and they allow someone to leave, the consequences will be unpredictable. Led by the giant, after his command to act, all his friends ran in different directions, some on the ceiling, some just started running quickly. The student who was called number 1 sat in his room and looked at his post on his gadget, reading a new comment. With a smile on his face, he thought that his post had gained popularity, and the comments had also started to accumulate. Martial Arts University Dormitory Room 101 comment was that Manhwa with the basic level of cultivation was addressing him. He did not think that it was possible to be at the 10,000th level of chi purification that the boy was talking about, but he denied, because he was telling the truth. Then there was a comment that, first of all, he should understand that after reaching the 10th level of chi purification, regardless of what skills he has, he in any case forms the basis for cultivation. If he really has the 10,000th level, then he must have inexhaustible energy. The guy was surprised and asked himself the question that if it is so, then it turns out that he has a very large reserve of energy. He can be invincible. This was followed by a comment that it is possible to check the reliability of the device used for measurements. The commentator thought to himself why he should respond to this kind of message. The current applicants are generally strange, but the guy didn't care because no one believed him. The student simply left his room at number 521 and started heading in an unknown direction. Putting his hands in his pockets, he thought that somehow it was too quiet in the corridor. It was better to go to a safe place in case the Order of Jormungand appeared. He was puzzled to see one of the boys standing leaning against the wall. The guy with the tattoo of the Order was very scared, because surely there should still be people at this time. The student also looked at him in fear. He wondered who this guy was, and it seemed to him that he had not seen him before. The guy with the tattoo thought that he was lucky because he was wearing a school uniform. Otherwise he would have been caught. But the student also thought that points should be deducted for wearing such a uniform. The guy reached for his tattoo, forgetting to cover it because they could recognize it, and asked the student if he had seen it. The student got excited because he thought of arguing with him just for what, and answered what he saw. The guy with the tattoo got angry. Red energy and red light began to develop near him, and in this case there was no way out. He would have to kill the student. The student, who was called number 1, began to panic, to which the boy from the run told him that he only had the level of chi purification. If he faced him, he would not be able to survive. The student only at that moment saw a familiar mark on the enemy's neck and remembered that it was Jormungand. With great speed, the boy with the Jormungand Order tattoo punched the student in the face, emitting a red light with red eyes. But the student, after putting the block with his hands to protect himself, pushed the guy with the tattoo many meters away, and he punched a hole in the wall. He was very frightened after this act and thought that the enemy was probably laying the foundations, and if he struck, he would be overtaken by instant death. The boy from the Jormungand Order put his hands above him and swung to strike, and the student thought in fear that everything was over. Even defending himself as needed would not be possible. And it was at that moment that the student's eyes lit up light blue, and when he was hit, the blue light almost completely engulfed the enemy and overshadowed the red magic. When the opponent raised his hands for the second time, the blue light blinded him and did not give him a chance to strike again. The 10,000th level of chi purification turned out to be much stronger than the foundation laid by the boy of the Jormungand Order. The opponent then doubted whether he was really at the level of chi purification, because he had never encountered such energy even in representatives of the Golden Pill. But this situation angered the guy from the Order not for a joke. In his opinion, How could a student behave like that at the level of chi purification? After he tore off his clothes, steam came out of his nose, and an evil smile appeared. The boy released even more red energy in the form of a lion, and it was called the Fist of the Meteorite Lion. The guy in a fraction of a second started to attack, being above him, and this time he thought that he would kill him for sure, and the student could only defend himself. The red fist began to beat first, and at that time the student placed blue blocks, which was no worse than the enemy's energy. After that, the red magic began to overwhelm the blue one, but she was in no hurry to run away from the enemy from the order. When the guy hit the student, he just started to run down, and was mentally afraid that his strength was being absorbed, and he couldn't move. The light blue and red magic then became dark blue and purple. The enemy was afraid because he had an assumption that he had inexhaustible energy that absorbed him into the darkness. And then the student acted by thrusting his hand forward either to strike or to strengthen the defense. But the student still hit the guy from the order, and that caused drops of blood, and a tooth was knocked out, and he threw him a couple of meters away. After this event, he got scared and asked himself whether he had taken off, and the student quickly ran towards the body that had flown away to examine it in more detail. His eyes were no joke frightened and looked directly at his wounded and unconscious opponent. The guy stood and was amazed that the opponent was unconscious and made a good dent in the wall. Raising his hands on bent elbows, he asked a question about what was happening to the most lifeless member of the order, who was at the level of Lang Chi. The student responded sharply, as if refusing to accept the situation regarding his inexhaustible power. He began to walk from side to side, thinking how he could even overcome a person with the foundation laid. Something must be wrong. And the boy remembered the moment when a comment was written to him that the energy at such a 10,000th level should be inexhaustible, and he could not believe that there was still too much energy. There was a moment in my head when the opponent's eyes were burning red, and he also remembered that his blood was boiling, and thought that maybe he had taken some medicine, and then he could have had a myocardial infarction. He hit his hand with his fist, and confirmed to himself that he was just lucky, and it was better not to leave him there because suddenly his allies could see him. The student took the enemy by the hair, and thought that to begin with, it was necessary to hide the body, and then go to teacher's son to discuss all this. A curator and a student flew over the school building, hurrying to see the consequences of Su Li and Zhao Tao's argument. They landed, and the blue glow that accompanied them all the way stopped in the same way. Propping up the broken wall, a giant was sitting next to him, his friend who was shouting the teacher's name. The teacher looked a little dazed, unable to imagine what caused such a destructive force. He put his hand into the pocket of his blouse, as if to take something out of it. The teacher approached the injured student and gave an unknown black pea. He put his hand on the student's shoulder and worriedly wondered what he would say about what happened. The guy grabbed his wounds and said that he and Su Li had argued and he did not expect that he would be serious, but when he realized everything, he was already in the wall. The curator could not believe that a person with the third stage of laying the foundations was affected by the cleansing. It was simply impossible. The other two students began to say that Su Li is still at the level of purification. How could he even win? There must be a method he used, and it needs to be dealt with. But the curator has been teaching them for 3 years, and has long understood what these guys are capable of. He told the disciples to take Zhou Tao to a safe place, and he would deal with everything for now. When he heard a voice behind him asking what happened, he turned his head. The curator emotionally replied that nothing had happened. It was just a dispute between students, and the man and woman explained to him that the director had promoted this mission to the rank of A. After all, the killers had reached the 3rd level of laying the foundations and, moreover, they had deadly weapons with them, and they also warned that he would be more careful. This conversation alarmed him a lot. He was surprised that it came to a mission of rank A in recent years. There were few missions of this rank, and probably Jormungand had prepared well. The surveillance room curator was looking at the cameras, and thought to himself that Zhou Tao was familiar with the fact that Su Li had problems. And besides, he used to be number 2 also. He mentally threatened Su Li that he would pray not to see him in the next life. On the cameras, it was visible how the purification of Qi rejected the laying of the foundations, and this surprised him very much. Propping his chin with his hand, he thought about sudden blows that were at a lower level. There have been sudden bursts of energy that lead to critical values of energy. A random impulse is obtained thanks to which you can defeat your opponent whose rank is higher in just one blow. But such cases are very few. Cultivation levels, from lowest to highest, Qi purification, foundation laying, golden pill, yuaning, transformation, return, salvation, Mahayana, and distress. The curator then continued his opinion with a hand on his chin that Su Li's good skills should help him with his entrance into the martial arts university. It was at that moment that the teacher did not see how a person crawled above him on the ceiling. His eyes were red just like those of the Order of Jormungand. In the boy's teeth, a knife with a release shape was visible, which sparkled. The curator also saw this reflection in one of the switched-off monitors of the surveillance room. He didn't know who was there and what was there, but he saw a full glare that shouldn't have been in a room where only he was. The boy immediately jumped from the ceiling and swung a knife at the teacher, but the teacher was instantly edited by reflecting with blue energy. It knocked the boy several meters, and his knife completely disintegrated. He said with quite a smile that from the very beginning he just wanted to find some information in the surveillance room, and did not think that he would meet anyone. The same snake that every member of the Jormungand order has can be seen on the neck. This became noticeable to the teacher, and he angrily reacted to the fact that Jormungand pretended to be a student to get inside. The boy started to emit sparks, and said that he could not leave him alive. The teacher began to create certain circles with movements that showed all his magic power. With sharp and accurate blows, he repelled any attempt by the boy to harm him. He placed a block so that he could not grab him with his hand, because the boy wanted to kill him. The guy swung again with evil eyes and sparks, saying that the deceased will now become like a turtle. But the teacher stopped his blow with his hand, and it surprised the young man very much. With his other hand, he gathered all his blue magic and swung a precision strike. This blow turned out to be very strong for the boy, and he flew for a couple of seconds. Then he found himself in the wall, and the blue light continued to accompany him. After such a force, he survived and opened his mouth and sprayed a small stream of blood from it. Sitting on the floor and clearing his throat, he decided that there was no other choice when he had such a strong opponent. The boy reached into his pocket and took out a large ball of dark color. The teacher did not understand what was happening and was ready to repel the attack again. With one strong movement and angry words, which will later reach the teacher, the boy threw the layers on the floor and created a pile of smoke in which he was not visible. The teacher covered his face with his hands and wanted to report that Jormungand broke into the office. At the height of the bird's flight, the school dormitory could be seen in the warm season. The two boys in the room were wondering why Wang Yi still hadn't returned. One of these boys was holding a bamboo stick in his teeth. His upper lip was dark as if it had been painted. It was not just a bamboo stick, it was a pipe he was smoking and thinking that he might have been found and killed. His comrade objected quite loudly because Wang Yi is a cultivator of the 9th rank, and he cannot be killed so easily. At the same moment, he returned to the door and said that he would follow him. After slamming the door and going out into the corridor, the boy's face was irritated. He was outraged by the fact that his partner had only just reached the rank of Golden Pill and was already so brave. But he was sure that he and Wang Yi would soon catch up with him. Frowning, the boy walked, completely lost in thought. Even his eyes seemed more disappointed than annoyed at this situation. But suddenly his eyes widened and his pupils became smaller. Something scared him very much. Coming out from around the corner, he saw someone pulling his friend by the hair. It was that comrade Wang Yi, and he was dead, blindfolded and shirtless. A wide streak of blood trailed behind him, which made it clear about the brutal battle that befell him. The boy did not appear from around the corner. He was watching and thinking to himself that the student wanted to brag about the fact that he was able to defeat Wang Yi, and everything was not as calm as it seemed. He didn't know what to do standing around the corner. He thought that he was definitely not a weakling because he was able to handle his friend on his own, and he was afraid to end up like Wang. Sweat dripped from the frightened face, and the lips slid down with a thin thread. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he took out something shiny, and thought that was all that was left. A revolver was shining in his hands, and he was completely engulfed in orange and red fire like light. At that moment, he remembered his fellow giant who probably gave him this thing. At that moment, he was told that this is the newest weapon developed by Jormungand. It absorbs spiritual power, and then sharply throws it to the surface, increasing the impact force several times compared to the usual cultivators. He held a revolver in front of him with an evil smile, and the power of this shot will be stronger than during the period of the golden pill. That's what the member of the order thought. Then he began to move because he believed that he would definitely overcome his opponent. During the shot from the revolver, red magic went around like some kind of whirlwind. This bright red light shone as if there was only one magic in it. The headmaster and the curator felt some familiar magic and were frightened by it. The bullet charged with magic flew straight to the target without any obstacles in its path. The guy from the order was wickedly happy, baring his teeth and waiting for her to fly. But when the bullet bounced off the guy's hood and hit the floor, he was confused. Smoke was coming from the hood, and there was a hole, but the boy hardly felt it. He took off his hood and was worried about what had happened, because for him it was definitely nothing significant. The bullet was stuck in the floor, and there were cracks, and that red light flickered. The student no longer held the boy's hair, let go of him, and went to the ball to see what it was all about. He took the flattened ball in his hands, and wondered where it had come from. The dormitory of the school asked the teacher if he had noticed the fluctuation of strength. It was mostly the work of Jormungand's hands. In front of the teacher stood the director, and a woman with a man. He told that one of them attacked him in the educational building, and that they seemed to be everywhere. At one point in the conversation, the director's eyes narrowed and became wary, clearly looking at something. Behind the bushes something was waiting that was unknown, and most of all dangerous, because it was now all over the territory. The director gathered a layer of yellow magic in his hands, and cautiously asked who the teacher was, who was standing with his back, and was scared. An old woman came out of the bushes, and greeted them with a big smile. They were surprised that she was there. The teacher was interested in how she ended up there in the first place, but instead, she said that she was looking for Su Li, and was afraid that he might be in danger. The woman supported her chin with her hand and thought about the fact that he had probably already encountered the members of Jormungand, and the teacher was outraged that the student was still in the dormitory. The teacher was stopped, telling him that this was not a premeditated act. A person releasing such energy is at the rank of a golden pill no less. But he stubbornly refused to listen to these words, because one of their students was still inside, and he needed help. He thought that even if Su Li used the same technique as when fighting one of the students, it still wouldn't help him because the opponent was at the rank of a golden pill. The director demonstratively made sounds similar to coughing so that he would pay attention to him. Then the director's hand deliberately blocked the way to stop the teacher for a moment. He came forward because as a school director, he could not just leave it like that. A sword lit up with yellow energy in his hands, and he made it clear to everyone what was to come. The bespectacled man reacted instantly. He began to reach for his weapon with his hand. The woman also reached for her weapon in preparation for the fight, and they were told to go behind. In front was the director, on the sides were a teacher and a man, and behind the headmaster and a woman. Another hole was punched in the wall of the school. Most of all, it was another attempt to kill a student. The opponent hit the student's knee with his hand, drawing attention to himself. When the student turned his attention to his opponent, he held the same flattened ball in his hands. The guy was thinking at that moment about the fact that the bullet fell on the man opposite, who was holding the revolver, and that he wanted to kill him. The enemy was very scared, and had a great desire to escape from that place, because nothing happened. He began to imagine how he would be attacked and tortured, and that his death would definitely not be painless. The guy thought about the fact that the opponent first threw irons, then started beating himself. Probably he wanted them to run after him. The student held the flattened ball in his hand, and was grateful to him for something. Then he clearly answered that it is possible, and he will not be able to defeat him. But he also could not leave everything like this. With one sharp movement, he swung the bullet at the enemy and thought that he would use this iron to distract attention, and then he would be able to strike and defeat him. He threw a ball that was burning with blue light with the words that he returns it. The bullet flew at an incredible speed, and blue light accompanied its entire path. The opponent stood frightened and was very confused as to why he could not move. The bullet did not give any chance for life, pierced the skull through. Glasses flew off, and there were splashes of blood. The guy smiled because he succeeded and thought that maybe he had a talent that he hadn't noticed before. He already had 2 corpses from the Order of Jormungand with one. It was difficult, and here is another one. The revolver was lying on the floor and was glowing with a bright red flame that attracted the student's attention. But he instantly reacted to the thing lying on the floor by running up to him. For some time, he stood and just looked at the bright flame that engulfed the revolver. He took it in his hands and said with a smile that it looked convincing, and he might take it and then use it. When the student went in the opposite direction, another member of the Jormungand Order was standing around the corner, and warily thought that what was wrong with that guy. How could he even kill Wang He and Ma Zhixiang? The hand of the member of the order began to shine with purple magic, and he thought that fighting face to face was certain death. But if he left, he would also die. Attacking from behind was also risky. Suddenly, they started shouting from around the corner, asking if any of the students were on the mountain, and he thought in fright that he had to go, because one of the owners of the golden pill had come. Out of fear, he put the hand shining with purple magic into his pocket. On the stairs stood the director in front, behind him the headman, a teacher, a girl, and a man. The student hid the revolver in his pocket, thinking what to do, because the voice was similar to the director's, and if they saw him, they would think he was one of the members of Jormungand. Propping his chin with his hand, he pondered his plan of action in detail. He still had the idea that it was necessary to improvise. He took one of them and began to drag him to the other, because it was necessary to make it look like they attacked each other themselves. He put his hand to the other's face, as if he had punched him in the nose. The picture was such that they just fought each other lying on the floor, and there was no magic. The director flew out from behind his hiding place, and such an appearance confused the student. He was followed by a curator, who was interested in where he came from and what he was doing. The guy turned to them and got scared, scratching the back of his head, thinking about what to say. On one of the upper floors of the building, a window flew out as if someone had deliberately broken it. A member of the Jormungand Order, the very one who fled from the heard voice, flew out of the window. He returned to the building thinking about what needed to be done in order to successfully complete the task. When he rose to his feet, he began to capture the space with his purple magic. His eyes were completely white. There was also a menacing smile, and his hand was placed forward and emitted a blue circle. The male and female students of the teacher and principal, and the monster's red bright eye could be seen in the purple swirl. Then a portal appeared which was covered by violet, black, and blue magic, and it was necessary to deal with everything. A member of the order held a knife in his hand, and the space was filled with red-brown color. Steam was coming out of the nostrils, and the dragon's jaw was covered in mud and blood. On one side of the portal you could see the stairs to the dormitory. On the other side there was a dragon that opened its jaws and was on the battlefield. He must have been sniffing out prey, and whether anyone was present on the other side. His bright red eye, which illuminated the way into the middle, looked into the dormitory. The students were surprised that the director, teacher's son, the headman also came. He thought that everything was over, that they would understand everything immediately. The director looked at the 2 bodies and asked the student what it was. A tear rolled down the boy's nervous and tense face, and he didn't know what to say. The director carefully considered the boy's reaction in half a turn and waited for an answer. In one wave of the director's hand, a golden sword appeared, and a yellow magic appeared near him that raised the air around him. Covering his hands, the boy told the director that it was a mistake. Yellow magic passed by the student, and when it touched his face something surprised him. When the director looked at him, He was very scared because he could do something. The director narrowed his eyes and thought that Suli was still in the stage of chi purification, and that someone else was to blame for the death of these people. He supported his chin with his hand, thinking further, and the yellow magic did not disappear. It was like his shield. The boy was told to leave because he could be in danger at any moment. The director put his hand burning with yellow light forward like an X-ray scanning the bodies. His look was surprised because they were at the stage of laying the foundations, and really someone was able to kill the two of them at once. Carefully examining one of the bodies, he raised his hand. The body was not transformed. Then, running his hand over the rib cage, he saw that the body was often subjected to beatings. After examining the veins, he stated that they had been taking nerve-stimulating drugs for a whole year. The cause of death was a rupture of the soul. In another, the fact that the bullet went through the skull stated that it was a fatal blow. The person who inflicted it should have been at the level of a golden pill, no less. So the student was useless here. And when he reached the neck and removed the collar of the blouse, he saw that they were members of Jormungand. Then his look became angry and aggressive. He was thinking about something. Then he grabbed his golden sword in his hands, as if preparing for the battle that was about to come. Having put on stronger gloves, it was necessary to look at everything possible. I would have found some more clues, because the members of Jormungand would not have come here just like that. With 4 hands, he looked through the pills in his body pocket and found Dabu's pill, which did not fit. Siju's pill also did not fit. Tianling's pill also did not fit, and the students were mesmerized. The student said to the director that he was not convincing. If he does not need it, let him give it to him. Maybe he will need it. In the pocket of one, the table noticed something black with corners that gave off a red glow. The director had a tetragonal seal in his hand, and no one except a specialist knows how to open it. The material was very hard, so it was impossible to break it. He reached out to the teacher to give it to him, and the teacher to take it to the laboratory. But when he handed it to his hands, the teacher did not have time to hold them, and she fell. It hit the floor once, and did not break after bending like a spring. She then flew to someone's white sneakers with gray. It was a student, and his facial expression indicated that he was surprised. When the seal came into contact with a foot, it instantly lit up like a flame. Everyone was very surprised by this. Especially the director was surprised because she broke down, and the teacher thought that Su Li's energy could not calm down again. The student nervously replied that it wasn't him. It broke on his leg. When the seal broke, there was like a small chip inside in which one point was burning red. The student was told that it was difficult to open. Why was it so easy then? The guy took it in his hands and told the director, with a smile on his face, that it was a communicator, and the director was quick to react by snatching it from the student's hands. He began to cast spells over it, because the cipher was not very complicated, and he could easily figure it out. After some time, he was already shouting that he managed to open the communicator. A hologram appeared that announced that after Huang Haobua, the invigilator for the entrance exams, came to Kaiyuan School, they should send 2 people to distract and kill the invigilator, and the rest should destroy the energy collection tower according to the first plan. After the words, the hologram fell into the headmaster's hands and began to disappear before his eyes. He squeezed the communicator in his hand and realized that the target of Jormungand was not the warden. Their real mission was to destroy the energy towers. Without looking back, the director said that these 2 people were just puppets. He said that as soon as the tower collapses, about 60% of the buildings will be unusable because they will not have energy, because the energy stored in the tower will come to the surface at the same minute, and with a force equivalent to an atomic bomb that will spread over the entire city. The headmaster was thinking about the city of Wuji, which was the real target of the order. The student raised his hand, saying he had a question for the director. He was confused by the fact that how such important information could end up in the hands of the wrong people, and the headman spoke for the fact that it is possible that the information could be unreliable to cause such a panic. The director gave them the answer that regardless of the reliability, they have to protect the tower. It is a matter of the safety of the entire city. If they do nothing, all cultivators will experience failure, An image of one of the order, with a tattoo of an endless snake, appeared before his eyes. Out of anger, the director clenched his fist and summoned a strong energy, and the children were surprised and frightened by such power from the golden pill. Then the director put his hand in his pocket to get his smartphone. He saw on his screen that the message could not be sent and was very angry that nothing was being sent. Everyone checked their phones and tried to send a message, but there was no signal. They started running in different directions, and the director also said that they would hurry up and publish the news. The director flew to the stairs on which blue light fell, and there were unknown debris. He, the teacher, and the student stood in front of an unknown hole with a blue glow in the wall, not believing what was happening, not believing that the stairs had disappeared. The student wanted to step into that unknown blue hole by taking the first step. The director stopped him with one wave of his hand, because more than anything, these are Jormungand's pranks. They want to trap him and cut off contacts between the outside world. The director said that first they needed to find out if they could somehow get to other places. They ran out, turning back from what they thought was a blue trap designed by Jormungand. After their spirits and traces were gone, claws began to appear from the blue mirage. Then not only did the claws start to come out of the blue haze, but also red eyes were visible. The company hurried to the place where the bodies were, and something scared the old man very much. She alarmedly said that the bodies were not there, pointing with her index finger to the place where they should have been lying. The director ran his hand in a white glove over the place where there were drawings of members of the order. The floor was covered with dust, and from the blood and traces, it was not as if the bodies had simply disappeared. The director also drew attention to the fact that they were on the wrong floor. The old lady did not understand how this could happen at all, because they were definitely coming back the same way. She and the student felt that there was no one behind them because there was silence. They turned their heads in the direction of the company that was with them, and something really scared them. Behind them was indeed an empty corridor without a single soul, and they were surprised that the director and teacher were not there. The boy immediately reacted to the situation and grabbed the elder's hand so as not to lose it. The girl was confused and blushed at such a bold act of the boy. He started to walk, taking her hand because they couldn't be separated. They had to stay together because the principal and the teacher had disappeared. The old woman seemed to be flying in her thoughts, repeating the boy's words. Behind them, a monster passed by on the ceiling, most of all the one that came out of the blue mirage. The monster's eye opened and glowed with a sky blue malevolent color. The monster's mouth opened above the head of the old man, trying to swallow her completely. He almost succeeded because the head of the old man ended up in his mouth. The boy's eyes also shone with a sky blue color and were like lasers. The monster didn't manage to eat the girl because the guy pulled her aside with a sharp movement, and he just snapped his jaw. They all looked at each other with three looks. The boy was an aggressive, angry monster, and the old man was very scared and confused. He grabbed her by the hand and pulled her forward down the corridor, telling her to run. The boy saw the nearest familiar room and started running in its direction. Opening the door at a run, they quickly flew into it, as if there were no obstacles ahead. As soon as they were inside, he reached for the doorknob to close the room. He moved the locker of one of the students, because it was impossible to let the monster in. Together with the old lady, they set up everything that was there, all the cabinets and bedside tables that were in the room. At that time, the monster began to knock on the door to them, but it was unsuccessful. Then, after they put everything in front of the door, they sat down tiredly, holding hands. When the girl caught her breath, she immediately noticed in confusion that they were holding hands. Rubbing his forehead, the student wondered if everything was okay with her because they were already safe. She, blushing and blushing, turned away from him, agreeing that everything was fine. The boy did not understand what was happening and turned his face to her in surprise. There was ventilation above the window, which could pose a direct danger to them. It was exactly those blue heavenly evil eyes of the monster that they met before that shone in it. The monster was watching them from the ventilation and waiting for the best moment to attack. In the next moment, the monster still punched through the ventilation with its paw. The boy was a little surprised. The jaw came out next. Opening it, he wanted to grab them, and the girl looked scared. The next moment, she grabbed the student by the neck and started screaming in fear. The student reached into his pocket. He did not quite understand how to use that thing, but he could fully use only one thing. The guy fired a fireball from the revolver that he took from one of the bodies. After the bullet was fired, they flew away in one direction, and the monster headed straight for the layer of fire. And the revolver kept burning in the boy's hands, and was accompanied by red magic. The bullet was headed towards the monster's mouth, and the monster didn't seem to feel any danger. When she hit the body, it left a burning hole on it that did not give a chance for life. The boy looked at the flames in amazement, and wondered why he had succeeded. The girl hugged him, and wondered where he got it from. He was honest with her, telling her what he found with people from Jormungand and forgot to give it to the director. They sat hugging, and the boy was worried about what this unknown thing was. The monster was lying with the burning side of his jaw, as if begging for help, and it looked scary. The girl rested her hand on her chin and thought about the fact that the sharp corners looked like the blade of a handle. If they found the information correctly, it was a horned dragon monster. The boy was stunned by such news, and the old woman informed him that this was some kind of social monster. This meant that there could be 5 or 10 of them, or even much more. One of these dragons wandered along the corridor of the dormitory, and most of all passed by the very room where the student and the warden were. A shadow slipped into the eye, either a wing or a tail or some sharp corner of a dragon. The student was holding a weapon in his hands, and the old woman was sitting on the floor waiting for further actions. He still did not take his alarmed gaze away from the girl, thinking about something. The guy encouraged her that she didn't worry so much. He thought that everything would be fine as soon as they found the source of the dragons. They might be able to return the dormitory to its original state and get out of here. And besides, they had just dealt with the monster. The girl smiled and listened to his heroism, and that he would not allow Jormungand's plans to come true. The wind tickled the nose of one of the members of the order. It was one of those who came to school with the giant. He asked the other how their plan progressed without knowing about the 2 dead, and he went about smoking his bamboo pipe without any worries. He exhaled purple smoke and broke the news that Wang He and Ma Jixiang were dead. The pink-haired boy was frightened and surprised by such news, because it made it known that the plan was already falling apart. Violet smoke billowed behind the wind as he continued to say that the members of the order were too carefree and underestimated the enemy. In the eyes of the purple member, Su Li had the appearance of a very strong student who did not want to see him anymore. The pink-haired man listened to the story with fascination and fear. He was not one of the brave. He took out a polygon and confusedly announced that it was necessary to tell about everything. His partner quickly ran up saying that it is impossible to report anything. If the commander finds out that they could not even deal with the student, he will definitely get angry. But he continued to get nervous, because if they do not complete the task, then they will surely end. The partner reassured with a satisfied smile and began to speak. Approaching the very ear that there is no need to worry, he lured the headmaster of the Kaiyuan school and the same student into a trap, and now nothing will stop them. He lit up the communicator with purple magic and continued to think that if they completed the task, no one would even remember Wang He and Ma Jixiang. The next moment, the hologram from the communicator lit up, and the guys warily saw the plan. The monster's claws scratched the floor of the dormitory corridor looking for prey. The monster made a hole in the wall, and his partners have long since ruined almost the entire corridor. The student put his ear to the door, listening for the attackers, how many there are and whether they are there. He reached his hand to the door handle, giving the command to start now. The door opened with a sound to the corridor. They were lucky because there were no attackers near them. But running out into the corridor, the student shot a fireball to the side while holding the girl's hand. The dragon paid attention rather late to the flaming ball that was launched clearly at him. The bullet hit her in the head with an explosion, and the dragon only managed to scream in fright. The picture of activities in the dormitory was such that the director and the teacher were on the 8th floor, and the student and the warden were on the 2nd, and the portal was generally located at the entrance door. The teacher thought that it was strange, because a lot of time had passed, but they still couldn't decide where they were. The director headed for the door. In any case, it was necessary to find Su Li and Li Sun as soon as possible. Maybe they were safe. He pushed the door and thought that they were still unable to resist. When the door was opened, 2 mouths and sky blue eyes of dragons were visible. They were 2 by 2, 1 dragon and the principal, and the same teacher with a dragon. The director immediately launched his yellow magic and made a circle like a shield. The teacher made his blue defenses, but the director told him that he should go ahead, and he would deal with the Darkon. The director's eyes shone yellow and golden, and his eyebrows were furrowed menacingly. He contained his strength in his fist in order to deliver a strong blow to the enemy. The monster opened its giant jaw with all its might at the director, but he struck a yellow blow on the same jaw with the words that he should go to hell. With one such blow, he threw the dragon back a couple of meters, damaging the building, and the teacher also knocked one of them to the ground and stood on him holding blue magic. The director was walking, and the yellow glow seemed to help him move forward. The dragon's sky blue eyes were angry and ready to attack at any moment. The director was contentedly holding his hand in a fist, squeezing the magic, because he had shaken the old man like that for a long time. One of the students clenched his teeth in fear. Sharp corners could be seen in the shadows. He swung his sword at the dragon, telling him not to approach him. The dragon instantly swung its paw at the student without fearing anything. He broke the wooden sword into pieces, and the boy was not jokingly scared. When the dragon's mouth opened in front of the student's face, he closed his hands and begged for help. The monster moved to a distance and stood majestically in front of him, as if admiring his helplessness. The boy's tears flowed down his squinted face, and the voice told him to get up because he was safe. He removed his hands from his face and opened his eyes to look at his rescuers. In front of him stood a student and an elder with a revolver in their hands, and the boy was very surprised that they were standing there. He burst into tears because he was also there, and the student was surprised that they knew him. The guy said that he knew him from his speech at the last induction ceremony, and that he was always a role model. The dragon was lying in a pool of blood, and the boy wondered why he was still in the dormitory, because there was a warning to move to a safer place. The student scratched the back of his head, reporting that he overslept, and when he wanted to go out, he unexpectedly encountered a monster. The boy in half a turn told him that he should not lag behind and follow them. They were on the stairs, afraid to look around the corner in order to find out the circumstances. When she looked out from around the corner, she saw a blue portal that led to another space. The guy who was saved was the most surprised of all three, and the student and the old woman looked at each other less emotionally, as if it was a usual thing for them. They saw a bunch of dragons flying in the red rocky world. The student, as the leader of the trio, told them that they were waiting for him there, and that he would go ahead. If he did not return, they should run, and there was no need to wait for him. He gave the revolver to the old man if they find themselves in a dangerous situation to use it, and she wished him success in return. He began to walk towards the portal, thinking to himself to be careful, because on the other side, a sleeping dragon could be seen, which was probably waiting for its turn. He touched the blue light with his hand, and continued to think that they had been sleeping for a long time, and then decided to wake up. It seems that this portal is the main reason for the appearance of dragons in the dormitory. If you destroy it, everything will return to its former course. From the boy's side in the portal, the dragon looked with its red eye and waited for the moment. Then the big paw still waited for a moment and swung at the student. He instantly reacted with his foot, jumping away from the scene of events. The dragon was not the one they met in the corridor and attacked. It was bigger and black. The guy flew aggressively, serious about this fight, which could end in different ways. The maw inside the monster was burning like the mouth of a volcano, inviting certain death. The elder and the student who were standing were shocked, and she tightly pressed this revolver. The guy flew sharply across the floor, raising all the dust, and on the other side, the dragon was sleeping. He was confused, and it seemed the portal did not transmit sounds. He had to make a quick decision, otherwise the monsters might wake up. Collected all of his blue sky magic into a fist for a powerful strike task, and swinging his blue magic fist at a run, he mustered the courage to strike. The dragon's eyes glowed laser red, and its jaw was menacingly wide open, preparing to give an answer. The guy hit the monster's mouth with one precise blow, but his strength seemed to have disappeared, and this surprised him very much. He had a couple of seconds to think about why the power evaporated at the exact moment he touched the dragon, and the dragon threw him with all his might for a couple of meters, smashing the wall. The student who was standing with the old lady thought that it could be done, because it seemed that Su Li was no match for him. The boy lay stuck in the wall and tried to regain consciousness, and the old woman tried to calm down because she was the only one who could help him. That red-haired monster had differences from the past. The outer shell could not be penetrated by its own forces, and the boy's usual attack would not change anything. The mayor was aggressive and fired a fiery shot from a revolver. The dragon managed to cover himself with his giant paw, but the bullet did not cause any damage. He removed his paw and angrily clenched his mouth, looking at the girl. The old woman stood scared, because she did not expect that it would not work, because before that everything was the other way around. The guy came to his senses, and with a broken lip shouted at her to run. The dragon went to the place from which the shot was fired, but the girl was seriously pointing a revolver at him. The student gripped the dragon's hind leg tightly with both hands, as if it could stop it for sure. The monster's burning mouth opened in front of the girl's frightened face. He hoped for a win, but his mouth closed right there in front of his face. At that moment, the student's magic seemed to begin to appear with new forces. He called the monster that he was his opponent should not be distracted. Blue small jets of hair began to pour out of his evil blue eyes. His hair stood on end. He was ready to strike again. He grabbed the dragon with all his strength, telling him that he would take him home. He tossed the dragon with a blue hurricane, as if it had the weight of a small ball. He got right into the portal from which he got out, and the monsters who were sleeping peacefully woke up in a daze. Those whose peace was disturbed began to step slowly towards that side. The student once again collected all his blue powers, so that all the monsters would stay with him. He touched the portal with his fist, and it glowed brightly with blue rays. It began to crack, as if that side of the monsters would disintegrate. There were more and more of them, and the circle that was moving was getting smaller. On the other side, a student could be seen with his fist out. He was watching this spectacle. He came closer to simply look the monsters in the eyes to say goodbye and hope to see each other again. The red-haired dragon struck at the almost closed portal, hoping that all was not lost. He began to approach incredibly fast because he could not believe what had happened. But out of anger, a fiery cry rose up at the red moon, and he waved his giant paws. Kaiyuan sports ground at a sunny day. Someone carelessly walked on the roof. It was one of the members of the Jormungand order. He approached the device with the thought that very soon they would know the true power. When a voice came from behind him asking what course he was from, he was completely taken aback by this situation. The man did not move his head at all. He just wanted to look at the voice with his eyes. It was two teachers. They informed that all students had to be evacuated. Then he turned his head and his eye lit up with a green light. How troublesome it looked. He didn't want to strain himself, but there was nothing left. One of the teachers drew attention to the almost completely exposed snake tattoo of the Order of Jormungand, and at the same moment he told his colleague who that person really was. It was necessary to tell others. The teachers managed to deviate in different directions from the red stream of magic. Their opponent told them that none of the Kaiyuan teachers are capable of anything. Dark fire uses spiritual power to distort space and make oscillations with a high-speed punch. He flew at them with red magic, saying that the two worthless people were clearly unlucky. The teachers took a step at the same time, preparing to attack back instead of running. They boldly released blue magic from their hands for an instant strike. It lit up brightly, and together they seemed to create a layer of fire. And after that, they boldly threw a blue ball that was like a whirlwind right at their opponent. This surprised and scared the clan of the Order for a reason, because they thought that it was a joint cultivation. Their powers merged into one layer because the teachers had a special technique, joint cultivation, one of the types of cultivation in which the powers of 2 or more people are combined to make a strong attack. The order members' past technique used a lot of energy, and the dark fire also consumes a lot of energy, and there is not much left. Smoke and dust arose after such a struggle, and the teachers decided to take advantage of this by rising into the air for another strike. They stood on the ground and released blue magic, pushing the enemy away. The teachers ran away without wasting a minute for the task of re-hitting. They were on different sides of the member of the order, swinging their arms and legs. The purple-haired boy had no choice but to cover himself, as their blue blows left him with no other choice. The teachers were serious without any doubts about their abilities. One of them held his hand behind the other's back, as if signaling for him to support him. This scared and surprised the member of the order, because he did not know what to expect. And he did the right thing, because the next moment a leg with blue magic flew at him. He turned around in the air and immediately got to his feet without any obstacles. He also collected his bluish magic in his fist again, preventing himself and the enemy from breathing. The next moment, the same fist flew into Jormungand, and he realized that he would not be able to escape. Clenching his teeth, Jormungand dazedly expected a blow straight to the face. But suddenly, shining with yellow light, a giant appeared between the three of them. He aggressively looked at everyone present with yellow eyes, and this quite frightened his acquaintance. The teacher shouted to the other one not to be afraid and just kill them, but he was no less surprised by the appearance. And he heard the cry, and then without any hesitation gathered his magic and began to strike. The giant snorted without fear. He was clearly stronger than both of them. A much bigger one with red eyes raised a fiery hand above the head of one of them. And at the same moment, the teacher was divided into two halves, and he did not even have time to particularly react to it. Everything happened right before the eyes of a friend who saw streams of blood and screamed painfully. After that, he swung a blue layer and jumped up, warning that he was the giant's opponent. The giant's leg began to rise, accompanied by black circles, as if the teacher of death was looking for it. He, with red evil eyes, pierced the teacher's body with a single blow of yellow light. He stared at his eyes and screamed. Blood came out of his mouth, and the glasses flew off from such a blow. The purple-haired boy was amazed at the appearance of their leader. Commander Jormungand, the owner of the Golden Pill, Commander Aoma, stood menacingly as if waiting for something. Kaiyuan dormitory was under a transparent dome and purple clouds. The student lay exhausted on the floor, talking about the fact that everything had finally returned to its former course. After the strange spiritual power disappeared, the director reviewed the notifications that were already rapidly arriving on his phone, because the signal was present again. They were locked up for too long. The director couldn't even think how far Jormungand had advanced in their plans. It was necessary to gather all the teachers as soon as possible. He left and told the teacher that he should inform his colleagues that it is necessary to gather in the tower immediately. The energy collection tower had a crystal at the very top that was surrounded by blue lightning. 6 teachers stood on knives in the air discussing the latest events. One of the dark-haired teachers talked about the fact that everyone had already seen the director's message about the security of the energy collection tower. Another light-haired man said that it was impossible to allow Jormungand to enter. She was interested in whether Teacher Chen had contacted other employees of the school. The teacher held the phone firmly in her hands, answering that Teacher Sun and the director were patrolling together, and the connection with the other two was lost. The giant held his partner by the neck, because the two at the stage of laying the foundations almost did not overcome him. It was a disgrace for a member of such an order, and he tried to explain somehow. Gathering his strength, he reported that a student at the level of chi purification had killed 2. If not for this, he would have finished the mission long ago. But the giant did not believe him that a person at such a level could kill 2. He still did not let go of his partner's throat. On the contrary, he began to squeeze it even more tightly. But the man begged to be given another chance to complete the mission. He took out his communicator and informed that everything was almost over. Only the energy collection tower remained. The giant seemed to have calmed down a little, because he was still useful to him. and quickly, without thinking, grabbed the communicator from his hands to check the information. But after that he released the purple boy to the floor, and he fell to his knees. Holding the communicator and looking at the hologram, he said that he would leave the tower to him so that he could settle his guilt. He was satisfied with his plan. It was evident from his evil smile. He took his partner, who had not yet fully regained consciousness, by the shoulder and squeezed tightly. At first, the giant was with a kind smile that did not predict anything, but the next moment his eyes glowed red, and an evil smile said that even if he dies, he still has to plant the last explosive. Only in that case the task of Jormungand will be completed. The member of the order was not jokingly frightened by such a facial expression, and he understood everything that was said to him. Such an answer and humility satisfied the giant very much, and he smiled slyly. His hand behind his purple partner's back began to gather a circle of red magic. Kaiyuan Min's dormitory. A student ran to meet the director and teacher. They were stunned that he was alone without a headmaster. He said that in the dormitory they came across another student, and the warden escorted him to a safe place and left him to report to them. The teacher was worried about the students, whether everything was fine or if they were not injured. The guy enthusiastically informed that everything is fine. A portal was found under the dormitory building, after the destruction of which the dormitory returned to normal. The director thought about this portal because it seems that someone used the connection with space, and in such a case, it did not surprise him that monsters appeared everywhere. He instantly stood on the yellow sword and praised the boy for a good job. But he and the teacher had time to go to the energy collection tower. On the fly, they said that the student would hasten to go to a safe place, and he agreed with them because he had no desire to meet the people of Jormungand again. The boy clenched his teeth aggressively. He was confused as to whether the student was really in the chi purification stage because he had Wanghe. He was watching the student's path from above, and was he the one who could kill two members of the order? With one sharp movement, he jumped from the roof of the building without fear of repeating the fate of his friends. The student heard how someone loudly stood on the ground, and was embarrassed by such an act. The member of the order became equally curious as to why Wanghe's energy was emanating from the boy's body, and the boy turned his face in fear and thought about who it was and whose name was given. Was Wanghe one of those bodies? Jormungand clasped both hands in front of him as if invoking his magic. But at that moment, the wind and flames rose up around him. He wanted to take revenge for his friends. The flame spread to the entire territory, and after the boy's words that the one who destroys the plans will die, the student only then realized that it was a member of Jormungand. When a whirlwind of orange flame wanted to capture the student, he stood in a stand preparing to give an answer. He could not see anything. It was not only fog, but also small particles made of spiritual power. He was as if surrounded by a barrier, and could not even move. Each person's spiritual power is unique, and it is related to cultivation methods and habits. Wanghe is good at physical cultivation, so his smell mixed with sweat. The member of the order remembered all the moments when his partner showed off his muscles, and after everything, he became even more angry that the student did not give them a chance for life. The next moment, he started running towards the enemy, and the flames seemed to part in front of him, giving way. A jet of flame appeared in front of the student and hit him in the face. A trickle of blood flowed from the boy's face, and this made him very angry. He supported his face with his hand, wondering how the enemy could find him. Jormungand's teeth clenched and looked like the fangs of some predator that hunts for prey. The boy did not have time to regain consciousness when he received a fiery blow to the face again. After that, it simply flew a couple of meters into the wall itself, picking up pollen. He could not lose, and suddenly remembered that the opponent had said that he felt energy. If the student remembered correctly, most of the trees planted near Kaiyuan were excellent conductors, and now was the blooming season. He wiped the blood that flowed from his lip with his hand, pondering the plan of the next course of action. Summoned the flowers of the trees, and the blue magic along with the blossoms flew towards the boy like a typhoon. Orange magic along with the flowers flew past Jormungand, scaring him. The colors went from orange to sky blue accompanied by white flowers. The student's eyes lit up in a heavenly color, and everything depended on how to smell. It was bad for Jormungand because the scents got mixed up and he couldn't find the student. And he, in turn, crossed his arms with blue lines and flowers, ready to attack. The flowers flew towards him more and more, and the blue magic became like a shield. He was ready to watch as his opponent hid, radiating powerful force. But the member of the order was brave and did not believe that the student could defeat him. A blue shining crystal appeared before the enemy's eyes, which quite frightened him. He was riddled with bullet holes, but no one shot at him, and Jormungand couldn't believe it. Flame magic raged without calming down for a single moment. The member of the order is reduced several times in torn clothes because it turns out that flowers can also be used as weapons. The student searched the enemy, hoping to find something good, and since the director was not there, everything would go to him. He found a red polygon with a snake insignia of the Order of Jormungand. This thing was familiar to him because the same thing was in one of the previous bodies. Clicked on the middle of this polygonal medallion and it started to move. A red hologram of a building appeared in front of his eyes. There was an energy collection tower. The boy called the moving yellow dot the target where the bomb was to be planted. Jormungand, the one with the purple hair and the last chance, climbed the stairs for a common goal. He instantly stopped and frowned because either he saw something or someone called. He wondered where so many patrolling teachers were on the territory. Jormungand smiled evilly and cleared his throat. He was happy with such a prey. It was one of the teachers. She thought it was a student and therefore wondered why there was a student. Was the safe zone attacked? Jormungand was cunning and acted as if he had a heart attack so that the teacher would come closer. And he reached into his pocket to get a revolver that was burning, and it seems that every member of the order had it. She looked confused and scared, because she probably understood that there was no way out. Jormungand put the flaming revolver to his chest, and the teacher only had time to look. He looked like a crazy wide-eyed smile all over his face. The next moment, the bullet was already flying into her, and pushed back by its force for a couple of meters. There was a flaming hole in her chest, purple magic was swirling above her, and blood was flowing in a stream from her lips. The member of the order stood for some time with his revolver aimed straight, as if he was ready to pull the trigger again. The man touched the teacher's wound with his hand, and scooped up blood with his finger. Then he smeared his face with the same finger with a satisfied smile. In his opinion, this was an example of how worthless teachers are. With half a turn and a smile, he looked at the body lying in a pool of blood. The next moment, he flew into the air to further implement the plan. The director was walking down the corridor of Kaiyuan looking for something on his phone, and a member of the order with purple hair was watching him from above. He was probably the only one who remained alive, not counting the commander. The director was angry that the three did not respond to messages, but he had no idea what had happened to them, and that they were being monitored. Jormungand was contentedly smeared with blood and with red eyes, clearly waiting for his moment of power. He resorted to acting again, grabbed his heart and begged for help. The director frowned and listened to these pleading words. He hardly had confidence because all the students had to be evacuated. But the next moment, after thinking, Jormungand was walking away, worried about what had happened. The order member reached into his inside pocket to retrieve his flaming revolver again. However, the school director narrowed his eyes and began to suspect something. The next moment, Jormungand fired a shot from a revolver that was surrounded by red magic. The director used special moves to pull out his magic in order not to give the bullet a chance and give a decent answer. An orange dome appeared around him, and a bullet flew straight at the target. Everything turned out so easily according to the director, because he managed to move aside. And then Jormungand didn't even have time to blink, or he didn't see how the director flew up from the side, and was ready to strike with yellow magic. In Kaiyuan territory, a fierce battle for life was fought between two different views and different goals. A large dust and cloud of smoke rose. The director thought that a member of the order had been hit hard. From his purple clothes, Jormungand took out his pipe from which he smoked, and which was probably a certain source of magic. He didn't think that there were strong people in Kaiyuan, and blood trickled down his face. After taking a full cheek of smoke from the pipe, he is ready to strike a suitable blow. With the words that they will see each other again, he released a lot of purple smoke and rose into the air. But suddenly giant female eyes filled with red fury appeared behind him, and it confused him. It was a block and the woman was above it holding orange chains that looked like they were burning. And it was precisely those who quickly, without delaying even a minute, flew in a row and were sent to Jormungand. It was one of the teachers. Her gaze was determined and aggressive, and Jormungand only watched as he was chained. But he did not have time, because he was already wrapped in orange chains as if in a cocoon. She was like a Spider-Man clinging to the wall and holding chains in her hands. And then she threw her hand back with them and ran at Jormungand. The member of the order immediately began to climb up, clearly not expecting such an attack. The teacher was pleased that she had finally caught him and approached him with a vengeance. And with a precise swing of the leg, she struck the opponent's face, and blood flowed from his mouth. After the blow, she released him from the chains, which fell to the ground and raised purple smoke and dust. The teacher did not stop for a moment. She bent down with a chain bracelet in order to deliver another powerful blow. Her foot landed right on Jormungand's face, stomping him harder into the ground. Her eyes shone with a red light, and the look was evil and serious. Jormungand took out his revolver for the shot that would save his life. However, she clearly and without doubt knocked the revolver out of her hands. She probably had no idea what power it possessed. She wanted to take revenge for Teacher Chinning by turning red. The director said that he was the only member of Jormungand whom they managed to catch. It was necessary to take into account the circumstances and not succumb to emotions. The red light was slowly fading, and she grabbed him by the collar of the purple blouse in anger. Taking a look at the hand, the director took a revolver. Even his energy could not affect that weapon. He could not even imagine how many other weapons the members of Jormungand have. The latter can be incredible. In another moment, he called the teacher's hotline, probably to report the news, gave an important announcement that the members of Jormungand pretending to be students should check everyone who approaches the tower, and should be careful because they have weapons in their hands that can kill a cultivator. He also ordered to take him to the training ground. The director wanted to interrogate him. On the sports ground, the student followed the route laid by the beacon, and could not understand why it began to flash more brightly. The boy thought about the possibility that Jormungand had hidden some treasures. He searched the entire square, climbing the pipes, peering into the distance, and simply walking on the surface. And suddenly I noticed a lot of devices with a red screen and strange signals, and it looks like they were explosive devices. I started to remember the lesson in which the structure of explosives was analyzed when the teacher, who was not entirely disappointed, challenged him to demonstrate. I remembered every word that the red wire should be removed first, and only then the green wire, but in no case the other way around. The teacher went on to say that if the green is suddenly removed before the red, but the student had a bad experience, because he demonstrated the green wire that was cut at first, and it turned out that it was this wire that activated the bomb for the explosion, which happened in class. From such a weak explosion, the faces of the boy and the teacher turned black and their hair stood on end, and while there was a lot of smoke, he wanted to quietly run out of the classroom. Fear flowed from his face. The student remembered that it was necessary to eliminate everything before the explosion, but he could not find everything red. In front of his eyes was a short red wire and a longer green one, and there was only one attempt. Suddenly, a blue circle with a target began its movement on the hologram, and it seemed to show the presence of one of the members of the order. And then it stood still without any movement as if it was doing something. But all this was watched by the giant Jormungand. He was surprised what one of them was doing there, and why their explosives did not work. The student sat tiredly rubbing his forehead, and next to him were disassembled explosives, which he neutralized. After that, he took the red polygon in his hands to check if any information was updated. On the red hologram, I saw how the object was gradually approaching and was 55 meters away. There was an urgent need to hide somewhere, and he instantly ducked into the first place that was nearby, and it was the bushes. The student laid down with his hands on his chest, and seemed to say a spell to himself that he could not be seen. The giant Jormungand quickly found himself at that place with the words, while his partner still did not understand what his problem was. He made a combat stance, preparing to give his opponent an answer at any moment. Then he paid attention to the remains of explosives lying on the ground, and this surprised him very much. And when he saw the boy's poorly hidden legs, he started shouting at him to get out, because these were not hiding places. The next moment, when the boy did not hear him, he got angry, clenched his fists, and furrowed his broad eyebrows. Orange magic gathered in his hand, his eyes were red, and baring his teeth, he continued to shout so that the boy would not make him guilty, as he was not going to come out of his so-called hiding place. However, the boy did not seem to hear the words, and continued his actions, as if with magic words, that he was not visible. However, the giant did not wait for a stream of orange magic to hit his nose right away. The student opened his eyes, startled and not expecting such strong magic. Jormungand's magic made a powerful explosion around the entire area. This glow was probably visible even a couple of kilometers away. After that, the boy got scared and rose to his feet with one movement. As if he had slowed down even for a second, he would probably have met the same fate as the bush. There was nothing living around. A giant was standing in front of the boy and asked who he was, where he came from, and why he had a token. The student held the same token in front of his face, saying that he had received it from someone, and that if he finds the owner, he can try to notify him. However, the tokens of the members of Jormungand are unique, and you can get them only in the case of a person's death, and this made the giant very angry. He rubbed his hands, and thought that he was just being mocked. His wide eyebrows were furrowed, and one glance showed that he was determined only for battle. The guy was not just scared by such a conversation. A yellow light was reflected from his face, similar to the enemy's magic. Indeed, Jormungand hit a yellow kick from the run-up the next moment, but he managed to dodge the blow. The speed and force of the blow was not what the student had previously thought, that maybe he was the owner of the golden pill. Jormungand looked over his shoulder thinking about how a boy in the chi purification stage could win over his colleague. His feet stepped with such force that the earth broke under them, and pebbles flew in all directions. With burning eyes, a leg pointed forward and bared teeth, he warned that it was only a demonstration performance. They are only starting now. The student looked at the enemy in fear for some time, as if he were a tick. Jormungand was the first to attack with half a turn and run, giving no chance. He hit the boy with such force that he flew a couple of meters away. Such a blow was unexpected. It flew with such force that it demolished one trunk and flew into the next tree. A lot of blood flowed from his nose. He supported it, but he remained alive, but with the feeling that all the bones were broken. While the student was coming to his senses, a giant approached him, and his shadow blocked the path of the rays. There was dust around them, and Jormungand stood contentedly asking if this was the whole battle. Eyes filled with red rage and magic hands grabbed the student by the throat, reminding him that he is only in the period of chi purification. This light could be seen even from a distance, and it was a pleasant feeling for the commander of the order. Covered in blood and bowing his head, he sat under the tree, and the giant stood still thinking that the bones were quite hard and he liked it. He took the red token from his hands, and the boy gave it up voluntarily. The commander turned around and left. He made a mistake, and needs to get in touch with Liang Yengu. He threatened that if they dared to break something. However, the student came to his senses, and decided to take advantage of the fact that the enemy had his back turned, and did not even think that he could gather strength for another battle. Jormungand turned his head to him, surprised that the boy was alive. However, the boy's words sounded like a bad joke. He said that the giant decided to leave when he had already had enough, and no one does that. He raised his hand with a blue flame stone. The Kaiyuan disciples were not so easily frightened. The commander didn't even think to be afraid, because the boy thought that he would be able to cope with him with the help of a stone. Did he think that he would survive? The blue streak of magic along with the stone flew at the enemy, raising dust. But the enemy caught the target with one hand without hindrance, with a sly smile on his face. After that, the boy started to run as if there had been no battle in which he was seriously injured. Jormungand's eyes were narrowed, but he didn't seem confused by his opponent's movements. Then he looked away, as if something was distracting him. The guy had using various distracting maneuvers around the enemy, and this tactic was interesting to him. The very next moment, he grabbed the commander by the stomach, which confused him. But with one successful movement, he threw it over him to the ground as if it weighed nothing. This caused powerful waves that broke through the ground around them. It felt like something had definitely exploded. There was so much dust and smoke that it was impossible to see those who were in it. However, such a throw did not have much meaning for the member of the order. He stepped forward to meet the boy with magical eyes and an evil smile. The student's face was almost covered in blood. It was flowing in streams. Jormungand tore his clothes and summoned his powerful yellow magic. He had not met such an opponent for a long time. The boy was the first such. The next moment he flew at the boy, and all that was left was to summon his blue magic and fight. The training ground in front of the headmaster sat on his knees, and in chains a captured member of the order. He needs to honestly answer questions about their purpose of infiltrating Kaiyuan. Jormungand said with a smile that in any case, they had already carried out the plan, and in a few minutes there would be an explosion. Or was it about the assembly tower? While they were there with a member of the order, all actions went into activation mode. He wanted them to know the true power of Jormungand. Everyone suddenly started attacking him. The director used her magic. The teacher stepped on her foot and pressed her harder with chains. Another teacher kicked her and swung an object similar to a folder of documents. The teacher informed that he asked the teachers to investigate the tower so that everything would be clear, and in this case the only way to make the school explode is to place explosives around it. The director took Jormungand by the collar of his shirt and asked where they planted the explosives and where the switch was located, to which Jormungand smiled slyly. Could he give such information if they planned to spend their last moments on him? He would gladly accept them. At this time, when the verbal battle was going on from the side for a certain distance, the power of the golden pill shone with its rays. The Kaiyuan safe zone was enveloped by a bright blue dome somewhere in an unknown location. Everyone was interested in how things were going. There were several explosions outside, but you can't go out until the teachers say. One of the students was sitting scared in the corner, but two students were opposite and reassured her that if she left, she could create problems, and everything was safer. The energy could withstand even strong attacks. The old lady was looking at something on her phone and remembered the words the boy said, and was very worried because he was going to come to the shelter, but he still wasn't there. Then she went to contacts and found an important one for her to call. When the beeps rang and no one answered, she reassured herself that nothing had happened. The old lady was biting her nails, starting to get even more nervous. She wanted him to pick up the phone, but on the other end of the receiver it was said that unfortunately the subscriber is out of range of the network. Tears streamed down her face. She was worried that suddenly the student met a strong enemy and could not resist him. The hand with the phone dropped in frustration without making any further attempts to call. After that, she quickly started running to help without any hesitation. She ran with the idea that nothing should happen to the student, for she was an important person. With his powerful magic, Commander Jormungand pushed the boy back a couple of meters. The boy wiped his lip, which was dripping with blood, and thought about the fact that he was not an opponent at all. The commander got into a combat stance, preparing to strike a new blow, and did not understand why he felt a constant flow of blood in his body. Probably his body had not been so excited for a long time. There could be no other reason. The student pointed his hand behind the opponent's back so that he would look because someone was walking, but the member of the order replied that he was not his rival, and it was better for the student to remain his hostage. Magic thickened around the giant. He rubbed his hands because he thought that he would not be fooled. However, the boy clenched his balls ready to fight back. He expected that the explosion would attract the attention of the director and others. One tear ran down his cheek. Not knowing what would happen next, the director had to hurry because he couldn't do it anymore. Jormungand approached him, and the students stood in a stand around them. The dust never subsided, but suddenly a bright light that shone behind the member of the order attracted his attention. He looked alert. Things were bad, and someone really came. Especially it was the owner of the golden pill. Without turning his body, and only looking from the side, he thought about the fact that the boy was specifically detaining him in order to arrange fluctuations in energy and thereby attract people. And he was deceived, and he realized it when he turned completely to the light behind him. There were teachers, and one of the order on his knees. The director said that he would have surrendered all the members of Jormungand, except for him, to be destroyed, and that his supporter had betrayed him. The chained member of the order was squeezed even harder to attract attention. This situation made the commander very angry, and his eyes became even brighter red. He considered them a bunch of unnecessary things since they were all there, so he will deal with them all. He stared at his eyes, and worried that a sharp pain pierced his body. He fell to one knee, and started coughing up blood and grabbed his heart with his hand. I remembered the moment with the student, and thought that it was the final energy from his blow. The teacher flew to attack the enemy with his blue magic, but the enemy saw it. But the teacher was not the only one. His colleague also did not spare a minute, and also attacked using magic. The hand burning with blue magic was already a couple of centimeters from the commander's back. The teacher delivered a rather significant blow to the back, and relied on the next actions of Teacher Lu, who was already swinging. It wasn't a problem for her. She kicked her right in the face. The force of the impact threw him a couple of meters, causing damage to the school and raising dust. The teacher stood on one leg and talked about how she couldn't even think that it was so amazing, and the student from the side was surprised because she had such long legs. But the commander, who survived even after such a battle, said that they should not look so high on Jormungand. They have a backup plan. Raised a hand from the smoke holding some red thing and pressed it. He stood up and shouted at the top of his lungs that they needed to destroy Kaiyuan. There was no longer a soul on the court. The rivals stood facing each other. Some time passed, and nothing happened. The amazing plan about which Jormungand shouted loudly did not happen. He looked angrily at the button, not understanding why it didn't work and what happened in general. The student stood smiling because it was he who disassembled all the explosives that were installed along the perimeter. Such circumstances made the giant angry because he destroyed all their plans. The director held a yellow layer on his finger, saying that they no longer had any trump cards, and if the opponent surrendered, they would hand it over to the law enforcement authorities. But Jormungand gritted his teeth and cunningly asked if they really believed that he could surrender. This would never be impossible. 5 mages gathered around him. Violet, pink, red, yellow, and sky blue. All of them were teachers and the director. And just then the headmaster ran to the student and asked if everything was okay with him. The headmistress ran up to the student saying that she was very scared, but he denied that the director and others were fine here. Frightened, he continued that it was dangerous there. Why did he come at all? But she was just worried. The giant laughed, covering his face with his hand, because among them, as he said, was one of the most powerful explosives, and those around him were not even aware. But no one could understand what it was about. Commander Jormungand clenched his fist around which red magic had gathered. According to him, no one should have left today, and he removed the seal. The next moment, the eyes of the chained member of the order opened wide and glowed red. The teacher shouted for everyone to immediately look at him, and the director said that energy was raging in his body. Jormungand turned black. Red rivulets poured from his red eyes, and with one movement, he broke all the chains around them. They thought he was about to explode. And then he ran burningly to the headman, while those around him shouted loudly to disperse. The student immediately defended himself. He immediately told her to go to the director, and she could rely on him for the rest. Suddenly he grabbed his opponent in a tight hug without any fear in his eyes. Commander Jormungand stood surprised and puzzled by such an act. The commander shouted to him that if he continued, he would die himself, but the student did not seem to hear this. The guy grabbed his opponent by the purple hair and he didn't resist as if he wasn't alive. And with the next movement, I threw him with the words that he should not even think that I will not accompany him to hell. The throw left an orange line and a lot of dust. The director did not let the headman in, holding him in his arms, because it was too dangerous there. He ordered the teachers to prepare for the defensive construction. It was impossible to allow the expansion of the scale. The member of the order flew, raising dust behind him, and widening his eyes as much as possible. The teachers talked to each other about what to prepare, and everything was ready using their magic. This angered Commander Jormungand even more. He clenched his teeth viciously, furrowed his broad eyebrows, and his pupils narrowed. The director folded his hands, calling for yellow magic that raised the air around him. The heavens were ready. The collection of energy between the teachers and the director continued. Each of them had their own special magic. The old woman rushed to the boy of an important person, but the woman and the man from the mission held her. Law enforcement authorities found the building to be dark and lit up in purple. The hall of law enforcement agencies, in which there were women watching something in the monitors. According to the report, the system tracked the explosion with a coefficient of 6 at the Kaiyuan school, and one of the women reported that the blast range was 100 meters. Sitting in a chair, the man repeated a fragment of her words, which was the explosion coefficient and range, looking at the diagram in front of him. Propping his chin with his hand, he thought that it looked like someone had broken into the school. The diagram showed all the detailed information about the explosion, and it was big but not a super explosion. He immediately understood that this explosion was made by members of Jormungand. They needed to go to the school for help. A swirl of red and black smoke and dust rose several meters up and wide. The commander and his partner lay side by side in a circle of fire with no signs of life. Not even a person in the Yuanying period would be able to survive an explosion of such strong energy. The headmistress was sitting on the floor wiping her tears. She was crying for the student. Everything was fine with the student. He waved his hand and walked out of the smoke to the company meeting. His smile was positive, but the blood was streaming down his face. But he began to see the people around him more dimly, and his eyes seemed to close by themselves. In the next moments, he began to lean back, or everything was not well with him. The girl ran to him, begging him to open her eyes and not to leave her alone. Others around also wasted no time running to him, worried about her condition. The director reassured her because he used energy to heal his injuries, and moreover he protected his internal organs, and there was no serious problem. On a magical purple sword, someone landed near all of these events. The teachers immediately stood up and turned their attention to the new people. On the chest of a light form, a purple chest badge caught the eye. They were representatives of the law. For women and one man, they were all dressed in uniform. The director told about the situation that happened, that the school was faced with a serious situation. The law enforcement agencies had to come earlier. They were going to take too long. But the man apologized for being late. He continued by saying that there is no need to worry because their office always carefully follows the plans of Jormungand, and their personal arrival is the best proof of that. The director cleared his throat and said that they have already dealt with the people. The rest is up to them. The man from the law enforcement agencies was alarmed by such words. He stood over the bodies of the order and did not think that Jormungand would send a person who has a golden pill, and he was interested in who revealed it, and the director proudly answered that it was a student of Kaiyuan school. They were all amazed that this was a student because he was much lower in terms of magic. Then they came to the place where the student was lying. He was in the period of chi purification, and how then he was able to overcome the golden pill Jormungand, and was it even possible? He touched it with his hand, emitting light purple magic as if scanning. This helped the student to come to his senses, and he saw several unknown people in front of him. The magic of the law enforcement agency shone in his eyes, but he did not understand what was happening at all. The man asked the boy if he had seen something, and a yellow flower was shining above his head. A yellow glow reflected from the boy's face. It is not known what exactly he saw, but he answered that he saw. The man covered his eyes, as if meditating, and the boy could see a lot of wrinkles on his face. The law enforcement authorities were obviously disappointed by such an answer. The man then told the student to look behind him. The vine includes 7 leaves that can bear fruit. The lowest stage yuanin on the left, early and middle indicate the growing stage. The elder was very surprised by this information. The first fruit of the vine was the peak of the yuanin period. After such words, the man praised the girl for her rather good eyesight, and she listened enthusiastically. His eyes suddenly glowed purple, and asked him to answer his question seriously, and not try to hide the truth. He approached him in the shelter, and asked if the boy was involved in everything, and if he was not hiding the truth. The man said to bring the equipment for testing, and the guy still needs to be checked. His assistants listened attentively, and bowed low in agreement. The gadget in his hands began to scan and analyze with a blue light. While the man was scanning, the student was very surprised at what it was, and the director explained that it is exclusive equipment of law enforcement agencies that can illuminate the past using the energy of the dead, but most of the fragments are only a memory. A lot of time has passed since the law enforcement officer met such a rival, and he was interested in investigating. He saw fragments of the giant's battle with the student and the removal of the seal. He narrowed his eyes and said that he understood everything, but the body would be taken away in any case. As for the rest, they will sort it out with the director, and the director told the old man to take the student and go to rest, and he still needs to resolve matters. The girl warned him not to be so reckless next time, because he might not be so lucky again. She then continued to tell that every time she repeats enough to cause trouble, and he obviously did not like it, and quietly turned away and said how there was a lot of control. However, the girl must have heard a whisper. She asked what he said, but the boy immediately understood everything, and it will not be like that again. The man listened to the conversation and turned his head a little to watch them. He was interested in the fact that the student was in the period of chi purification, and already 3 days later, everyone gathered in a quiet and carefree square. The words were heard that everyone already knew about Jormungand's infiltration into the Kaiyuan school, and now everything has been decided, and the entrance ceremony is ready again. The students discussed among themselves that Jormungand sent the owner of the golden pill unexpectedly, and the fact that there was such a determined person among the students, and one of the girls was very fond of that student. The director cleared his throat loudly, so that those around him could hear him, and stopped the noise. He stood on the stage saying that, first of all, he wanted to say that it is the students who have their future, therefore everything depends on them. They need to cultivate themselves properly in the future. They will hang all the current affairs on their shoulders. Therefore, they need to carefully prepare for the exam and strive to enter a prestigious university. And the director continued to speak about the situation with the student Suli. He made a great contribution to the destruction of Jormungand. Therefore, he earned a letter of recommendation from the law enforcement authorities, and, taking into account all the circumstances and achievements, the school decided to grant him a place in the martial arts university. The surrounding students were angry, because how could he enter there at all, and who hoped that he would also be lucky enough to enter there without exams, and were amazed that even a letter of recommendation would be made, and he would be able to go to work in the authorities without hindrance after graduation. The old woman quickly ran up to him and congratulated him, because now he has nothing to worry about. The boy was overwhelmed by such a thing. The girl stood looking at him with an amazing look and said that he had a great future. Behind them, the teacher raised his hand and shouted a joyful greeting. He hugged him, because everything was as it should have been. He had an excellent academic record, and who else, if not him, wanted to thank the teacher for teaching him for so many years, and was always worried that he could not lay the foundations. But the teacher helped him find another way to enter. The teacher straightened up and said that this is what he had to do until he can enter the university. His efforts will not be in vain, but it is not worth suffering. The company that took part in the battles told the boy to go back and rest. He confirmed that he would work hard and not let him down. In the dark evening, the student Su Li's house, he finally arrived after all the riotous battles. I was satisfied with the fact that the arrest will be over. Although the issue with the introduction has been resolved, the main problem has not been resolved yet. He was taking a bath with his rubber duck thinking about how to lay the foundations for it. Someone was ringing his doorbell, and there was a sign next to the bell asking him not to ring it all the time. This surprised the boy because who could come at such a late hour? Putting on shorts and a sweater on the way from the bath to the door, he shouted that he was coming. When he opened the door, a girl with short black hair was standing with some documents. He was no less surprised that one of the teachers came and stood on the threshold with her arms crossed. She said that she was sent by the director and showed an envelope with a purple seal. The boy knew that it is not necessary to expect good things from the pearl. Since the director sends her to him at this time, then he wants to give an additional task, and this scared him. So he refused because his body had not yet fully recovered, advised him to wait until the beginning of classes. At the same moment, the teacher's leg rose in the air to prevent her from refusing. Since the guy wanted to close the door, she kicked it almost at the top, and he did not expect such a development. A little frightened, he led me into the building and, going to the middle, informed me that it was about his university and employment, asking if he really didn't want to listen now. The teacher put an envelope on the table. There was a letter of recommendation from the law enforcement agency. After graduating from the university, he could join the agency. Moreover, they had a small request. It was necessary to go to the underground guild during the summer vacation in order to gain experience. The guy listened carefully and read the recommendation letter at the same time. He was very angry after hearing where he would have to go. Obviously, it was a scary and unpleasant place. The underground guild, located in an underground city on the border of fierce monsters, is considered a terrible organization, and the underground city is a place where countless criminals and illegals gather. Murders, thefts are challenges that are not for life, but for death, and life is put on the line every day. The underground guild is a camp of a group of criminals, and the guild regularly issues various reward missions. But they are even more limited. You don't get anything until you reach the goal, and very often the members of the guild betray and kill each other. They did not spare anyone, even their superiors. It brought them some kind of satisfaction, and if you go to an underground city, the question arises whether you will be able to return alive, not to mention entering the University of Martial Arts. The student put the letter back on the table and pushed it back to the teacher. He wanted her to convey to the director that he does not need it. As well as the qualification for passing, he can find another way to enter the university. But the teacher pressed the blue sky stone on her ring. She wanted the student not to refuse so quickly and understood that he was worried about the fact that the underground city was too dangerous. So before leaving, she would like to give something back. She laid out things and spoke for them. Soul pill, even if his meridians are torn and will remain at the last breath, it is worth eating it, so it will save life. And an instant special chain mail, wear it under clothes. Ordinary swords, guns, bows will not be able to harm him, and as long as he does not appear, the incarnate cultivator will be able to block the blow. The student was torn inside between yes and no. These were rare treasures, but he would have to constantly worry about his safety. But he still decided that such treasures should remain with the teacher. However, she obtained a limited black card that was issued by an underground guild and could be possessed by a small number of famous personalities in the cultivation world. But with her help, the boy will be able to walk through the underground city unhindered. He was surprised that she also carries a black card with her. And then, with a smile, I thought that if the card is really so strong and can be given so easily, maybe it was a fake to fool him. The teacher pounded her hands on the table in front of the boy, clearly nervous about the boy's answer. She asked if he had thought it through, and the boy was frightened and thought that it was not so difficult. Ambiguity made the teacher even more angry. The snow swirled around her. She said that this was a real opportunity to prove herself. Didn't she have the desire? This underground guild might be able to help him find a way to overcome the period of chi purification. While the teacher was telling this, he was fascinated by the pure energy that swirled around him. The whole room was covered in snow by the teacher. She did it as an example. because after that she will be able to control her energy freely. She poked her finger into the body, saying that it is full of energy, but it cannot fully come out. And then he will be able to deal with her just like the snowflakes that she thickened, and will also be able to create something similar. But then it was just a flow of energy. Then a fire lit up in her hand, and she said that if you put pressure on it, it will be able to take any form, and if you give it any attributes, it will be able to change its state. She said that before coming, she talked to his class teacher, and he was never worried about cultivation, but he was first in every test. This leads to the fact that his environment became extremely comfortable without any external pressure. This is possible, and there is a reason why he cannot move from the period of chi purification to the period of laying the foundations. Only when faced with trouble will people change. You just need to click on it. After letting out a wave of blood, she continued, the underground guild is dangerous, but the items and black cards she gives him can protect him to the maximum extent possible. He must believe, because all this guaranteed his safety. With a frightened face, he thought about the fact that the teacher's words sounded quite reasonable. His thought continued with the fact that since childhood, he did not worry about cultivation. Regardless of who it will be, he will provide himself with the best resources. Therefore, the growth rate is also very high. Is it possible that the reason why he cannot overcome the chi purification period is that he lives in too comfortable conditions? They said that if he still insists on refusing, she will not force him, but will take back the black card and the treasures. However, when the teacher took the letter, he intercepted it and agreed to go to the underground guild. Sharply frowning his eyebrows, he thought about the fact that this was a significant matter. I also thought that he would not touch dangerous things, would not undertake dangerous tasks, and would simply ignore dangerous people. Having taken the treasures in his hands, he already dreamed that as long as he stays in the underground guild for 1 month, he receives a guaranteed condition for admission to the Bureau of Law Enforcement Agencies, and admission to the university will definitely follow him. He had nothing to lose, so he sat looking at new things, and the teacher didn't bother him anymore. She just left. Finally, at the door, she still turned to him and said that everything was already decided. Then, closing the door, she said that tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock someone will take him to the underground city. The next day in the morning, someone started ringing his doorbell. It must have been someone who would see him out. Gathering impatiently, and with a smile on his face, he shouted that he was on his way. We just needed to wait a little. When he turned his gaze to the hole that remained after the teacher's leg, he saw the old man there. When he left, she was satisfied and asked him if he was saddened by such news. The old lady herself carried out the teacher's assignment and escorted him to the underground city, and he didn't want to prepare for the entrance exams to the martial arts university, and when he would still have time to go to the underground city. The University of Martial Arts is preparing for a possible period of famine, and this year a new method of entrance exams for hunting monsters has been introduced, which she must familiarize herself with in advance. The mayor heard this from her father. The others did not know this. The boy told her that the underground city is more dangerous than they, and she think, and that she should not cry when she gets into trouble. She insultingly answered him that they will see which of them will cry. He started to walk, but she shouted to him that he was walking in the other direction. The underground city was in the opposite direction, and then she was not surprised that the teacher asked to lead him. The guy, as if joking with her, said that if she is afraid, she can take her back, but she replied that she is not afraid. This is a normal physiological reaction, but the guy knew that she has a lot of courage and told her to hold on to him. She grabbed his arm with pleasure, but he thought it was too close. The underground city is completely black with red lightning, dull as if it is not alive. The gate to the underground city was like a transparent floor with a large red stone. The man stood and smoked a cigarette, complaining that they stand there every time and guard. One of them was sure that no one could get into the underground city, and the other regretted that he had no money for normal drinking. But suddenly, looking through the monocular at the surrounding area, something or someone caught his attention. He poked his finger telling his partners that someone was approaching them. In the monocular, he saw exactly that student and the elder. They were laughing with the idea that the couple had come on a date. The third finished his noodles with a smile and thought that they were lucky today. Two of them had machetes in their hands. One had a mace, and the other had a stick with spikes. The noodles that were not finished fell loudly on the floor, but the plate remained intact. The next moment, they were already crouched down, preparing to fight with the students. The mayor and the student approached the gate and began to say that if someone is there, let them open it. They need to go to the underground city. But raising their heads up, they saw how 4 armed people were flying straight at them. One of them, who held a fairly large machete in his hands, said that this was the first time that prey came to him on its own. Then one of them started shouting for them to get into a position, probably preparing for battle. However, their appearance was as if it was a group of 4 guards, 2 giants. A guy with a machete was sitting on one of them, and the other was sitting on the mace of one of the giants. The guy immediately commented that they looked very angry and not at all friendly. All the people of the underground city are illegal, and of course, they are not will be good old age. You need to be careful and follow him. The guard shouted at them that if the girl wants to enter, she should show her strength, and if the student knows the rules, he should hurry up, otherwise there is no need to blame them. The boy reached into his pants pocket and began to pull out the black card that the teacher had given him. And then, after the words of the guards, what would be their advantage? Without thinking further, he threw it away, thinking that this card was useless, but maybe they would be lucky. Frowning, the man thought that it was a hidden weapon, not expecting what the consequences would be. The card hit the guard standing in the middle at high speed. He was lying unconscious, and his friends wanted to take revenge, because how did the boy dare to harm their brother, as they told him? Assessing such an act, she said that with his skills he was lucky to learn hidden weapons. However, according to him, it was just a throw. The card stuck in the opponent's forehead not too deep. He remained alive and very angry. He took out the card and angrily said that they are not leaving today until they pay compensation, because there is only one loss. However, the boy nervously thought that he had broken some porcelain. The man was fearfully looking at the black card as if it were a familiar thing. The black card featured numbers and VIP and was written in gold. He quickly started running to the student with the headmaster. Everyone around was shocked by such an act. I started bowing and apologizing. I didn't know that this year they would visit them so early and now open the gates. The girl was standing behind the boy and asked if everything was fine, why his attitude changed by almost 180 degrees. But he was also no less surprised because he didn't even put pressure on them. They thought maybe it was all because of the black card that the guard returned. The student remembered the words of the teacher, who said that this is a limited series of cards issued by an underground guild, and a small group of people have them, and with their help, they will pass into the city without any obstacles. Was it so easy to use it? The teacher was not lying, thought the student as he walked away. The other guards were very surprised that he missed, and instead he asked if they even noticed the black card number 009 belongs to the principal of the Kaiyuan school. If they dare to provoke these students, he is afraid that there will be a lot of problems later. Every year, the director sends a couple of students there to strengthen and improve their abilities. As far as the guard knew, more than half of them later became strong cultivators. The director has a wonderful intuition. However, he did not understand why a boy who was in the stage of chi purification was sent this year. They entered the underground city. There was chaos everywhere. Someone begged for help. Someone said that the next goal was to kill the leader. The girl showed a hologram, and the underground guild is in the center. As soon as they enter the city, no matter which way they go, they will still end up in the guild. The underground guild was lit up with yellow light. People were flying around, and this made an impression on the young people. Underground guild hall, there were a lot of people there, and everyone was talking loudly. The student showed a black card and asked what they needed to do because it was their first time. The consultant of the underground guild said that they are the owners of the black card. They had to go for it. The people around also heard this, and were surprised by the black card because the boy was so young. No one thought that he could be the owner of such a card, and he was already standing and greeting Mr. Su. One of the counselors held up a tablet on which the principal from Kaiyuan School was calling. The director gave the main tasks for this month. If he wants to survive there, he must adapt to the local rules. There are no precise orders. Everything depends only on him. After the conversation, he was given a new black card with the room number. The woman said that they had registered them, and they had to go to the first Colosseum. The student and the elder were afraid that they had to go to the Colosseum. The women took the boy by the hand and said that it seems that he did not know about the trials of their guild yet. All the participants who were registered for the first time in the underground guild have to fight to improve their abilities. However, in the first test the monster will not be too strong, and he will definitely succeed, the women said about it. They led him to the elevator and said that the Colosseum is underground. You need to go to the elevator. A woman's hand pressed the gilded elevator minus the 10th floor. The student elders were shocked by the fact that all the floors lead down not so deep, more than 18 floors down. The consultant said that the deeper they descend, the more dangerous it becomes. She also asked not to walk alone. While this conversation was going on, they had already descended to the minus 10th floor. The consultants informed that they were already at the site of the Colosseum in front of them. The guy was very scared, and for a while, he just lay there. A man with red eyes and a giant bear were fighting in front of him. The man punched the monster's jaw with his fist, as if it were not his opponent. People shouted in support, and said that they invested all their savings to make it more energetic. Such words of the fans seemed to give the man new strength, and he put the enemy in the ground. Thus he won, and people were happy about it, because it made them rich, and the presenter said that it was a great battle, and they are looking forward to the next player, wondering who it will be. Then he said that this will be the youngest owner of a black card in the history of the Underground Guild, and those around him really wanted to see this fight. The next owner of the black card, Su Li, and the representatives of such a card have special privileges, but he was scared that the next in line was coming. He took off his black jacket and thought that it was a terrible privilege, and the old woman earnestly wished him luck and shouted that he should be careful. While he was walking, the fans thought that he must have been very strong if he already had a black card with him at such a young age. The whole Colosseum was on edge from such a significant event. The guy was different from the previous participant. The presenter wanted to introduce this candidate, and when he saw his data, he thought that there must have been some mistake because he was in the period of chi purification. Everyone was surprised because they thought that he had never even seen a monster. Some were happy because if the monster killed him, he would earn a fortune. Some thought about the possible theft of a black card. However, the boy did not seem to be worried, because before that he had already met monsters and even killed a few. The presenter continued that there is nothing more to say. It is necessary to start the test. Behind the dark cage stood a monster. Probably the only thing that could be seen was his red glowing eyes. The people around were scared why they released this particular monster. Not even the owners of the golden pill could handle him, not to mention a person who is in the period of chi purification. Everyone was afraid that the boy would not leave alive today. The mayor was no less worried about such a turn of events. She knew that the student had to live. The presenter said that in front of them was a steel wolf that had won in past battles. I wonder what the conclusion will be in this battle. The boy was worried about such a thing. Whether the first test should not be an introductory one. Why then they brought out such a strong monster. The monster came out, and the boy asked if he had any weaknesses at all. However, with a little misunderstanding, the presenter replied that it was written that the wolves were supposed to lead, but for some reason the king of wolves turned out to be him. A man sat somewhere hidden away from everyone and drank wine from a glass. An assistant came up to him and said that according to his instructions, an E-level monster was replaced with an A-level one, and he praised it for this. It was a good job. Even if someone is brought to responsibility, it is only necessary to clean up a little and blame everything on a malfunction in the operation of the system. Of course, No one will guess that it is precisely their handiwork. Wolves belong to the class of dogs, which meant that they rapidly attack and tear apart. Just then, he was looking for a moment to attack. Then, the wolf stopped looking for a moment and started attacking the boy. And that's when the big battle started. The presenter commented that the table wolf was the first to attack and whether the boy would be able to resist. The mayor was the boy's support group and started shouting and wishing him luck. Meanwhile, the boy thought that it was necessary to make as much effort as possible, otherwise it would be embarrassing to lose in his first exam. Crossing his arms on his chest, the boy began to release his sky blue magic. This turn of the situation surprised the monster. He was simply startled by such light for a while. The blue ball lit up the entire Colosseum. No one could see what was happening inside. The presenter was surprised. He was not sure if he correctly saw the strength of the student who pushed back the steel wolf. Also, everyone wondered if he was really in the period of chi purification after such a strong repulsion of the wolf. The first ranks were in danger. However, the presenter himself was injured. There was a bruise under his eye. He apologized. They had to put everything back in order now. On the first rows, someone asked for help. Someone even said that it was so and thought about the first row that it could be dangerous. The consultant told the old woman that her boyfriend was not so bad because he won the A-level monster, but they were just classmates. The girl closed her eyes and thought through her fingers that the guy's strength was amazing. Even she was not sure that she would be able to overcome the monster at the stage of laying the foundations, but he was able to at this stage. However, even after such a strong blow, the steel wolf survived and stood up for a new battle. The presenter saw this and immediately warned the boy that the monster was evil. The wolf circled around the boy, creating a red hurricane. He wanted to confuse him with his fast movements, and the boy could not predict from which side he would attack. The presenter commented on this by the fact that the steel wolf ran to his crown wolf shadow technique, and the student was confused, not understanding why there were 4 of them, and which of these bodies was real. Since he did not understand which of them was real, he touched the floor with his magic. The presenter shouted loudly that it looked like the student was going to fight back. He was releasing his energy. They looked at each other with the wolf, and the student said that in this case he could kill everyone. A new battle began and 4 monsters attacked the student's blue magic layer. The wolf's body was burning with flames in its movements and look. There was no fear. The presenter commented that for unknown reasons the steel wolf seemed to have lost the ability to move. But the fans could not believe it because it was a monster of a high level, and did not believe that the boy was in the period of chi purification. The opponent kept trying to move his paws. He did not lose hope, and the student caught this moment, and without wasting a second reached out to him. The student grabbed the wolf victoriously by the lower jaw, but the wolf, in return, could not interfere in any way. The next moment, the boy grabbed the jaw and knocked the steel wolf off his feet. Everyone around admired such an act of the guy, and he asked that he wouldn't have to pay for the destroyed floor. In general, the guy who was in the cleaning period and played against the steel wolf survived with a score of 1-0. The doctors immediately provided first aid to the monster, but reported that they tried very hard. But unfortunately the steel wolf could not move. The presenter began to announce that the student won the exam. He led the student through the entire fighting ring and praised that it was a pretty good job before he laughed a little because he did not expect that with such a period it would be possible to win even though the black card holder could be weak. And the girl from her fan zone was happy with such a victory. She knew that everything would be fine. Then the presenter touched the monster's body with his hand and said that you should look at the trophies won. He took out a piece of A-level yellow monster crystal from his body. It was definitely a remarkable thing. Such a crystal was valued at 100,000 yuan. One of the fighters hoped that he would also have the opportunity to own such a crystal someday, but his friend said that it was nonsense. Such things appear only after killing a monster of the same level. If he leaves, he will surely die. He handed this magical crystal into the hands of the student, but he did not believe in such an event. All Colosseum awards belonged to the participants. The points were also transferred to the guild account. Underground guild points are the currency of the underground city and can be exchanged for things at any time. He thought that no one in this world knows about the value of the crystal. Whether it is cultivation alchemy or the instruction of magical tools, a large number of crystals are required. The higher the quality of the crystal, the more energy and value it has. Killing monsters, you can not only get guild points, but also crystals. The student dreamed that in such a case, if he fights every day, maybe in just a few days, he will become the richest person. The girl congratulated him on his first victory, and also on receiving an award. Putting his black jacket back on, he was still immersed in his dreams. The person who sent the monster of such a large level was very disappointed that he managed to escape again. A glass of wine lay broken on the floor. He wondered if there were still people, but he was told that someone was already on his way. It seems that the special person who was supposed to defeat the student was on his way to the ring. The woman had gray hair, a confident gait, broad shoulders, and it was clear from her figure that she was well physically trained. However, the mask completely hid her face. Only her light eyes could be seen. She came out of the aisle and shouted that she wanted to fight the boy. The presenter was happy with such an event. He announced that the boy was challenged by the owner of the black card. The person who had just defeated the monster 8 levels will have to face another challenge. Everyone thought that this girl definitely came for this crystal. It seems that today's participant in the chi purification period will become famous. The consultants told him to accept the challenge, but the headman defended him because he had just defeated the monster. Why again? However, they objected because everyone who enters the Colosseum has no right to refuse the challenge. This is the rule of their underground guild. However, he was a little angry, and his nose was bleeding because there were almost too many rules. The girl was also enraged by such rules of the underground guild, but the boy seemed to try to restrain her by putting his hand on her shoulder, and he agreed, especially since everyone was looking forward to the battle, and he was ready to show it to them, and reassured the girl that there was no need to worry, everything would be fine. She looked down and exhaled, repeating his words, that everything will be fine. They stood facing each other, and 2 lanterns illuminated them personally. In this darkness, the woman's eyes shone blue. Her eyebrows were furrowed and without any fear. However, there was something in her that confused the boy and scared him a little. The tattoo on her body was similar to the tattoo of the Order of Jormungand, but not everything was finished with them. The presenter wanted to introduce the rules. There were no time limits, and there were no rules. They only needed to defeat the opponent. The winner can receive any reward from the competitor, including life. The student was surprised that after such words Jormungand took the weapon out of her hand. The next moment, the rival began to rapidly fly at the student with a weapon in her hands. The boy was ready to strike, but he was confused. It seems that the man who set everything up was the main Jormungand himself. He admitted that the boy was the most amazing person from the chi purification period whom he had ever seen, but it was a pity that he decided to become their enemy. In this case, he wanted to stay with him in the underground city forever. The woman began to attack without pulling out her knives from under her sleeves. However, the boy's question about where she got the weapon did not stop her. He managed to dodge this blow and continued to say that the rules do not allow the use of weapons. But she didn't seem to hear what he was saying. She kept hitting her while standing on her hands and feet. The boy had time to dodge every blow as if he had anticipated it in advance. However, the woman still had knives in her arsenal from the front of her shoes. She took out additional ones. The guy was a little scared by this development of events because he didn't have any weapons. Without missing a second, she swung her leg at the boy, but he jumped, but uncertainty was visible in his gaze. When she struck, the knife left a mark and cut the boy's blouse. Either from the boy's body or from such a strong blow, the knife shattered to pieces. Fortunately, the teacher gave him an attribute, otherwise everything could have happened differently. When the teacher gave the chain mail, she told him to wear ordinary knives, pistols, and bows under his clothes. They would not cause harm. The guy had the feeling that the woman was unfamiliar with martial arts. His clothes were ruined. After that, She squatted down and couldn't believe how it was even possible. Her eyes looked very frightened and her eyebrows were furrowed aggressively. While the woman was running at the boy to strike a new blow, he thought that every time Jormungand made an attack, their people almost did not represent themselves. However, unexpectedly for her, the guy reached his hands to her face. Top pulled his face to his knee to give her the first blow. She was on one knee when the boy struck without arguing. He was able to hurt her because he did it quickly and accurately. The eyes rolled without any chance of life to the ceiling, and a trickle of blood ran from the face. The woman flew several meters, and the first rows were again in danger. Such a strong blow raised dust and caused a certain school to collapse. Everyone was surprised that he really killed with one blow. Someone said that he has been going to the Colosseum for more than 6 months, but he had never seen someone kill his opponent so easily, and someone shouted that there must be some kind of limit. One of them completely undressed and said that he was glad she lost, otherwise he would have had a hard time. The presenter approached her and opened her eyes wide to see if she was alive, but she was unconscious and the opponent without breathing could no longer fight. The student definitely won the match. In such an exciting moment, the presenter announced that it was necessary to congratulate the student on the victory. It was an unsurpassed and undeniable victory. The girl jumped up from her seat and shouted that the student was the best. According to the rules, he could take any object from the competitor, but since no one informed them about the weapon, it was declared invalid. But she had no other objects, so all her points are credited to him. The presenter quietly told the boy that he scored 2,000 points in a day and earned a lot of money. And for today the games in the Colosseum are over. Everyone was invited to come tomorrow. Someone from above was unhappy that the guy won. He killed a professional killer at the stage of laying the foundations in just one blow. It was the man who arranged the release of the A-level monster, and who was the main member of the Jormungand Order. He clutched a red polygon in his hands, probably the same one that every member of the Order had. After launching it into action, he threw it on the floor so that a hologram appeared. The hologram said that the boy was a variable value. He could not be ignored, otherwise he would destroy all their plans. 3 people bowed, and the man said that you can rely on him. He will not leave everything just like that in any case. The hologram disappeared with the words that she was confident in the actions of this person, because unlike the other, he never failed. The unknown person continued to stand looking at the student. It was necessary to send a message to the 23rd number, but he informed his assistants that this meeting was to take place in the evening in the old city. After all this commotion, the student found the girl and said that it was necessary to leave here, but she did not understand why so quickly. He said that the opponent was from Jormungand, but the old woman could not believe where they were from. When they entered the elevator, he asked if the girl remembered that the director spoke about the real goal of Jormungand. Maybe it was to get into the city of Wuji. There was probably a much bigger goal behind all this, and the opponent did not look like a person who came to get points. It seems that her goal was to kill him. After the guy said that it was dangerous, and you need to be very careful, the girl smiled and grabbed his arm. Very quickly they either went down or went up to their negative 3rd floor, because all floors in the underground were negative. Each floor of the underground guild was designed in the form of different functioning partitions, and it was incredible in the girl's opinion. But when they were walking through the rooms, the guy said that he would be there if something happened. She needed to call him, and the girl instead agreed and replied that he was tired fighting monsters and needed to rest. Standing at the door of the room, the girl blushed and seemed to want to say something, and she blushed because she stuttered and complimented him that he was very handsome today. The boy also blushed at such a compliment and, breaking the door handle, wished him good dreams. He went in and closed the room from this side with the upper lock so that no one would disturb him anymore. The guy called because he needed to tell the director as soon as possible about the meeting with Jormungand, because who knew, maybe they are up to something again. The principal was sitting in his office in Defa at Kaiyuan School. It was already late, and he couldn't think who would be calling. Without waiting for the director to say a word, The boy immediately began to tell that he met the order again in the underground guild. The director was shocked by such news and immediately worried whether everything was fine with him and the headmaster, and whether there were any injuries. The guy kept complaining and talking about his adventures, that he even fought against a woman from the order and everything was fine. And at that time the director was thinking about what the order was doing to the underground city. The director said that he would take care of everything. The students just need to be careful and call at any time. Leaning into the computer monitor, he kept thinking about why the members of the order had come to the underground guild and what they needed. After such news and thoughts, he was interested in what the bureau does and started calling them. The office of the reception department immediately picked up the phone, but the director asked if he really got there. He asked how the investigation into the case of Jormungand's invasion of the Kaiyuan school was going, but the woman replied that they had not received any information about the invasion. The director was very frightened by such information and shouted, asking if they really did not receive it. Because of this tone, the woman painted her nails a little bit, but the director informed that a few days ago their people took away the bodies of the order. The fact that she painted her nail by mistake made her very angry and disappointed. She began to explain loudly to him so that he would calm down. She could say with confidence that the Law Enforcement Bureau had not received any information about the Jormungand organization, and there were no corpses either. The director sadly put down the phone, not listening to the woman's words any longer. He remembered the moment when the bodies were taken away and could not understand how it happened because he was sure that people from the bureau came and took them away. What could have happened? In the dark alley of the underground city, the same person who arranged everything in the Colosseum was walking to the meeting place. Somewhere in the darkness, red eyes shone in the fog. That was the only thing that could be seen. He was much taller and wider than that person. According to them, they had not seen each other for a long time. He was adjusting his gilded monocle, which was similar to one of the Law Enforcement Bureau that visited Kaiyuan school. On his jacket, you could see a purple brooch that was also owned by one of the Law Enforcement Bureau. With his magic, he raised 2 closed tombstones and said that he brought something. Then he opened them without touching them to reveal who or what was inside. When they opened, you could see 2 members of Jormungand fighting with the student. They were the owners of the golden pill, the fair-haired giant, and the one with purple hair who watched the murder of his other 2 companions. The one who came to the meeting touched the body of the giant and said that it was a rare experimental material and wondered what he wanted for them. He needed to kill one person, for which he was interested in, who caused such damage that he spoke personally. He reported about the student who, despite the fact that he is in the stage of chi purification, still overcame the owner of the golden pill, to which he thought it was a monster. He replied that the student should not be underestimated. A smile appeared at this monster. He was curious that until this period it might have been the ideal experimental material. After all, it was one of the Law Enforcement Bureau, the captain of the 9th Squad. He did not care for what purposes this student would be used. He should not have left the underground city. The mayor informed you that this was the end of the first season.